Why did no one look her in the eye when she entered the briefing room? The maps were already spread out, the markers circling areas of red and black, and still, not a single pair of boots shifted to make space for her. She slid into the chair at the corner of the long steel table, the one with the dimmest light above it, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Her fingers were still shaking. She tried to hide it, resting them on her lap beneath the table, but the tremor carried through her wrist up into her forearm. She clenched her fist, held her breath, let it out slow. No one knew what she had seen before arriving here. No one asked. Maybe they didn't want to know. The major at the front cleared his throat. His voice was rough, rasped by too many late nights and endless briefings. "This is not a standard retrieval," he said, pointing at the red-lined valley on the map. "It's a rescue, time-sensitive, and dangerous." Her eyes followed his finger across the terrain. Narrow ridgelines, thick forest cover, villages scattered like broken teeth. She knew that place. She had walked its dirt roads, smelled the wood smoke, heard children playing between ruined walls. But that was years ago, before everything had changed. "Intel confirms hostiles have moved 3 captives here," the major continued. "One of them is important, not military but valuable. The other 2, he hesitated, as though the words weighed too much. Locals who helped us." Around the table, soldiers shifted in their seats. Some crossed their arms. Others chewed at the inside of their lips, already calculating risk versus worth. She didn't move, didn't blink, she only listened. There was something the major wasn't saying. She could hear it in his pauses, the small crack when his tone slipped. He was withholding a detail, maybe even from himself. Her chest tightened, she swallowed it down. The mission file was passed along. When it reached her, the sergeant beside her didn't hand it so much as drop it, the corner of the folder skidding across the table into her reach. She caught it before it fell. Her eyes lifted just enough to meet his. He looked away first. She flipped the folder open. Grainy surveillance stills, coordinates, estimated troop presence, nothing she hadn't expected. But then at the very bottom, a small photograph, blurred, torn at one corner. Her breath hitched. She pressed her palm over it before anyone noticed. "No, not here, not now." The major dismissed them with a sharp nod. 2 hours, get ready." Chairs scraped back. Boots pounded on concrete. The room emptied in a rush of murmurs and metallic echoes. She stayed seated until only one other remained. Corporal Ruiz, younger than most, still carrying the awkwardness of someone who hadn't yet built walls around himself. He lingered by the door, helmet under his arm, glancing at her as though he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Finally he muttered, "You good?" She forced a nod, a smile that wasn't one, always. He didn't believe her. She saw it in his eyes before he left. And then she was alone. Alone with the folder, the photograph still under her palm, burning like a brand. Her chest rose and fell. She let her hand slide away, stared at the photo again. A girl, dust in her hair, a laugh frozen mid-motion, eyes that mirrored her own though younger, softer. Her sister. But no one here knew. The captives, that important civilian, the locals, they were just names on a sheet to everyone else. But for her, one of them was blood. She pressed the photo against her chest, eyes closed. For a moment she was back there, years ago, standing in the doorway of a crumbling house as her sister chased fireflies in the fading light. The air smelled of rain and clay. The sound of laughter cut the silence like bells. And then the blast, the smoke, the ash. She had thought her sister was gone forever, until now. A voice broke the memory. "You're with me on the left flank." She turned. Captain Ward. He had appeared silently, like he always did, tall and lean, with a face carved by too many battles. He never smiled, never frowned either, just studied people as though he could measure their worth by the way they stood. She stood now, straight, even though her legs felt like lead. "Copy," she said. He nodded once, walked away. 2 hours, that was all she had to prepare. Her locker creaked as she opened it. The scent of oil and metal wafted out. Inside, her rifle broken down into pieces, each one polished like new. She assembled it by touch, each click and snap grounding her heartbeat, slowing the tremor in her hands. Scope aligned, magazine seated, safety checked. Her fingers brushed the etching near the trigger, a small engraving only she knew about. A single word scratched into the metal years ago: hope. It wasn't standard, it wasn't regulation, but it was hers. Around her, the others geared up. Some joked to mask the fear. Some prayed under their breath. One scribbled a quick note on a scrap of paper, folded it, and tucked it into his vest, a letter to be read if he didn't make it back. Every soldier carried something. She carried silence. The rotor wash of the helicopter hit like a wall when they stepped onto the tarmac. Wind whipped hair across her face, grit stinging her eyes. The sky was fatting, clouds bruised purple and gold, a storm building somewhere beyond the horizon. Inside the bird, the sound swallowed everything. Metal rattled, engines roared. She sat near the door, eyes fixed on the valley far below as the terrain rolled past. Ruiz sat across from her. His lips moved, but she couldn't hear. She shook her head. He leaned forward, yelling over the roar. "First time with us." She blinked. Was that what they thought? That she was new, invisible until now? She just nodded, easier than explaining. "Don't worry," he grinned. "Ward's tough but fair. Stick close, you'll be fine." "Fine." She looked away. The storm in the distance flickered with lightning, silent from here but alive with fire. The pilot's voice crackled through comms. 2 minutes. The team checked gear, tightened straps, loaded weapons. The mood shifted, laughter gone, replaced with focus. Every breath timed, every movement deliberate. She closed her eyes for just a moment. In the dark behind her lids, she saw her sister again, not laughing this time, waiting, eyes wide, silent. "I'll find you," she whispered, the words lost in the thunder of blades. Then the bird dipped. The valley yawned wide beneath them. Go, go, go. Boots hit mud. The air smelled of wet earth, sharp pine. The helicopter rose, disappearing into cloud. And then silence. They were alone. Ward raised his fist. The squad froze. His hand shifted, signaling left. She moved without hesitation, rifle snug against her shoulder, eyes scanning the tree line. Every sense sharpened. The world narrowed to breath, heartbeat, the crunch of leaves under careful steps. Shadows stretched long between the trees. The forest pressed in, thick with secrets. She felt it, the weight of eyes unseen. Something shifted in the underbrush. She dropped to one knee, rifle up, finger steady on the trigger. A pause. Just a bird, wings beating hard as it lifted into the air. Her exhale was slow, measured. But in that silence after, she knew the enemy was close, watching, waiting. And somewhere beyond these trees, her sister. She didn't let herself think about what state she might find her in. Alive, hurt, afraid. Or worse. No, not now, not here. She pushed the thought down, kept moving. The mission had begun. And with it, a truth she would have to face alone. Because if anyone discovered why she was really here, everything would unravel. Everything. How long could silence last before it became unbearable? The squad moved through the forest like shadows, their boots sinking into damp earth, their breath clouding faintly in the cooling air. Not a word was spoken. Every sound mattered. Every crunch of a twig, every hiss of wind between branches, every stray echo might carry farther than they intended. She felt her pulse in her throat, heavy and uneven, yet her steps were steady. Training had taught her that. Years of drills. But tonight, training collided with something else, something raw, personal, unshakable. She could not tell them that every step deeper into this valley pulled her closer to something she had lost long ago. Captain Ward raised his fist again. The line froze instantly. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. His eyes flicked toward the ridgeline ahead. Dark outlines of crumbling stone walls peeked through the tree line, ruins of a village abandoned decades earlier. But abandoned didn't mean empty. Ward gestured 2 fingers forward. Recon. Ruiz moved first, crouched low, rifle up. She followed, her scope sweeping the angles, her chest tight but her movements precise. The ruins loomed larger. Stone walls half collapsed, ivy and moss clinging where families once hung laundry and children once ran barefoot. A well stood in the center, filled not with water but with shadows. A sound faint, metallic, she froze. Ruiz looked back at her, his brow furrowed. He hadn't heard it. But she had. She lifted 2 fingers, pointed left. He followed her gesture reluctantly. They advanced toward a crumbled doorway, steps measured, rifles ready. She pressed her shoulder to the wall, breath shallow. Inside, she could feel something. Not see, not hear, feel. She tilted her head, listening. There, the soft click of metal on stone, the shift of weight like someone crouched in the dark. Her hand tightened on the grip. Ward's voice came low through comms. Status. She hesitated. If she called it, the squad would storm in, weapons drawn, and the fragile thread of silence would snap. If she stayed quiet, the danger might grow teeth. Ruiz mouthed, "What do you hear?" Her answer came in action. She slipped inside, rifle raised, eyes adjusting to the gloom. Dust floated like ash in the slivers of moonlight. The scent was old stone and mildew. Then movement. A shape darted to the side, her finger pressed halfway on the trigger. "Wait." The word was a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through the tension. It was Ruiz, it was Ward. It came from the shadow itself. Her eyes narrowed. Slowly a figure emerged, thin, trembling, not an enemy, a boy. Barely 12. His hands were raised, empty. His clothes were torn, face streaked with dirt. His eyes were wide, wild, searching her for something she couldn't give. She lowered her rifle an inch. Ruiz swore under his breath. "What the hell's a kid doing here?" he muttered. The boy spoke quickly, words tumbling out in a language Ruiz barely understood. She caught fragments. She had learned enough years ago, back when she still believed in bridges between people instead of walls of war. "Soldiers here took people down the road in the church." His voice shook, but the meaning was clear. Her chest clenched. The church, she remembered it. White stone once, stained glass shattered long ago. The place children hid during storms. Her sister had hidden there once. She swallowed hard. "He says they're holding them in the church." Ward's voice snapped over comms. "Extract the civilian, leave him behind." She looked at the boy. His eyes were pleading, his body shaking like a trapped bird. If they left him, what chance did he have? Her mouth opened but closed again. She couldn't argue, not here, not now. Ruiz bent low, whispered, "Hey, you'll be okay, kid." He gestured toward the woods, but the boy didn't move. He just shook his head violently, whispering a word over and over. She recognized it, sister. Her heart stopped. He wasn't just scared. He had family too, someone taken, someone inside that church. Her eyes burned. For a moment, her silence felt heavier than her rifle. Ward's voice again, "Move now." Ruiz tugged her arm. She followed reluctantly, the boy's figure fatting behind them, swallowed by the ruins. The squad reformed. Tension crackled like static in the air. Every man and woman here knew what they were walking into. Not a skirmish, not a sweep, an entrenchment, hostiles with captives, time against them. They moved along the dirt path, moonlight fractured through branches above. The wind carried faint sounds, voices, laughter, harsh and brittle, the clink of bottles. Ward raised a hand. The squad crouched, forming a line. Ahead, the church rose out of the earth, broken steeple pointing like a jagged tooth toward the sky. Firelight flickered through shattered windows. Shadows moved inside. Her stomach knotted. She could see it, almost feel it. Her sister may be behind those walls, maybe waiting for rescue that would never come. Her throat was dry, her palms slick. Ward leaned in close. Positions, 2 on north, 2 on west. You're with me on the east. His eyes locked on hers, unreadable. No mistakes. No mistakes. They slid into the underbrush, her rifle scope scanning the angles. One guard at the door, slouching, careless, his weapon hanging low. Another smoking near the broken fence. She lined her scope on the first. The crosshairs hovered over his chest. Her finger curled around the trigger. Her breath caught. Killing from a distance was supposed to be clean, precise. But there was nothing clean about watching the rise and fall of someone's chest, about seeing the faint curl of their breath in cold air. Her vision blurred, she blinked hard, focused. Ward's whisper in her ear, "Take him." Her finger pressed, the rifle bucked, the guard dropped. Silence. Then chaos. Shouts erupted inside, boots pounded. The other guard fumbled, raising his weapon. Another shot rang Ruiz. The man collapsed. Ward surged forward. Move. They hit the church door hard. Wood splintered. Inside, smoke and firelight mingled. Shadows darted, gunfire cracked. Her ears rang. The world shrank to flashes of light, screams, the acrid stench of gunpowder. She moved on instinct, weaving through pews, rifle steady, each shot an echo she would hear in dreams. And then she saw them. 3 captives bound near the altar, 2 men bruised and bloodied, and between them a girl. Her breath caught. Dark hair, dirt on her face, eyes wide with terror. Her sister. Time fractured. She wanted to run, to tear through ropes with her bare hands, to hold her, to whisper that it was over. But gunfire pinned her down. Ward barked orders. The squad fought like machines, clearing the hall. Her sister's eyes found hers. Recognition flared, a soundless cry. She tried to move. A burst of bullets tore into the wood inches from her face. She dropped low, teeth clenched, fury igniting her chest. Ward's voice roared, "Cover left now." She fired blind around the pew, heart hammering. The shooter fell. Silence returned, broken only by the groans of the wounded. "Clear," someone shouted. She rose, running to the altar. Her hands shook as she cut the ropes, her sister collapsing into her arms. For a heartbeat, the war vanished. All she felt was warmth, fragile, trembling warmth. Her sister whispered her name. Tears blurred her vision. She pulled her close. "I've got you, I've got you." But even as she held her, she knew this was not the end. The real storm hadn't even begun. How far could they run before the valley swallowed them whole? The church still smoked behind them, flames licking through broken windows, the stench of gunpowder and charred wood following like a shadow. Her sister clung to her, weak but breathing, each step heavier than the last. The squad moved fast, weapons raised, eyes scanning the dark tree line. But no one believed it was over. Not yet. Ward's voice cut through the comms, calm, cold. "Extraction point is 2 clicks east. Stay tight, no stragglers." She tightened her grip on her sister's arm. The girl stumbled, bare feet scraping against gravel, breath hitching. She wasn't built for this. She was just a civilian, someone who had survived by hiding, not running headlong through a forest under fire. "Slow down," she whispered, crouching to steady her. But Ruiz was already beside her, eyes darting nervously to the shadows. "We can't slow down," he hissed. "They'll be on us any second." Her sister's weight sagged against her shoulder. She shook her head. "She can't keep this pace." Ruiz hesitated. The squad pressed on ahead. Ward glanced back, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Leave her," Ward ordered. The words slammed into her like a blow. Her mouth went dry, her chest constricted. She hadn't expected Ward to know. She hadn't told him. She hadn't told anyone. But the way he said it, clipped, final, told her he understood exactly who this girl was to her. And still he said it. Her sister's hand clutched hers tighter, as if hearing the order too. her eyes wide, terrified. "No," she said. Her voice was steady, but her insides shook. Ward's expression didn't change. "She's slowing us down. We risk the entire team if we keep her." Her breath came fast. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She could feel the eyes of the others on her, waiting, judging. Ruiz shifted uneasily. "Captain, come on, she's just a kid." Ward's jaw clenched. "And kids die every day in this valley. We don't compromise the mission." The silence that followed was heavier than the night itself. She wanted to scream, to fight, to lay bare every truth she had buried, that this girl wasn't just another civilian, wasn't just another casualty waiting to happen. She was her blood, her last connection to a life stolen by fire and ash. But the words stayed locked in her throat. Ward's eyes bored into hers, cold, demanding. She bent, scooping her sister onto her back. The girl was lighter than she remembered, fragile as a shadow. "Then I'll carry her." Ward didn't argue, he didn't nod. He just turned, signaling the squad forward again. They moved. Branches whipped against her arms, thorns scraping skin. Each step burned in her thighs, her lungs. The girl's shallow breaths warmed her neck, each one a reminder of why she couldn't let go. Behind them, the first shots cracked through the night. Bullets tore bark from trees. Voices shouted the enemy had found their trail. "Contact," Ruiz barked, spinning and firing into the dark. Muzzle flashes lit the forest like lightning. The squad dropped low, returning fire in sharp bursts. Ward's voice cut through the chaos. "Keep moving, don't stop." Her instincts screamed to turn, to fight, to hold the line until her sister was safe. But her body betrayed her, legs pushing forward, eyes locked on the faint glow of the extraction beacon somewhere beyond the trees. The firefight roared behind them. Boots pounded earth. The forest became a blur of smoke and firelight. Her sister's voice whispered faintly in her ear, "Why are they chasing us?" She couldn't answer, not truthfully, not in words a child could bear. "Because we're not supposed to be here," she said softly, "but I'm here now." The girl's arms tightened around her neck. A sudden explosion ripped through the night. The ground shook. Dirt and leaves rained down. The shockwave flung her sideways, crashing her shoulder into a tree. Pain exploded up her arm. Her sister slid, nearly falling, but she clutched tighter, refusing to let her slip. "Ambush," someone shouted. Figures poured from the tree line, rifles raised, faces twisted in shadow. The squad formed a half circle, firing back with everything they had. The air thickened with smoke, flashes of light, screams. Ward grabbed her shoulder, his grip iron. "Get her out now." The order struck like a paradox. A moment ago he had told her to leave the girl. Now he was giving her a chance, or maybe a sentence. She couldn't tell which. She ran, not because he ordered it, but because every instinct screamed at her to move. Her legs carried her through undergrowth, her sister clinging like a lifeline. Gunfire echoed behind her. The forest swallowed the sounds, muffling them but never fully erasing. Each step was a war, each breath a battle. Her mind splintered into two voices. One screamed that she was abandoning the squad, that she was a coward, that she was breaking the one rule drilled into her: no one left behind. The other whispered that she had already left too much behind in this world: a home, a family, a childhood. She wouldn't leave her sister too, not again. She stumbled into a clearing, moonlight spilling like silver on the grass. For a moment the silence was absolute. Her chest heaved. Her sister's face pressed into her shoulder, eyes closed, lips pale. "Stay with me," she whispered. A twig snapped. She spun, rifle raised, breath caught in her throat. A figure emerged, Ruiz, his face slick with sweat, dirt streaking his cheek. He raised a hand, chest heaving. "Ward sent me," he panted. "You two are cut off, we'll cover your exit." She stared at him, and the others. His eyes flicked away, just for a moment. "They'll hold as long as they can." The unspoken words landed heavy. She wanted to argue, to run back, to refuse this impossible choice. But her sister stirred weakly, moaning in pain, and the sound shattered her resolve. "Which way?" she asked. Ruiz pointed east. "Extraction beacon, 5 minutes if we push." 5 minutes, 5 lifetimes. They moved together, silent but urgent, weaving through brush. Every sound now was amplified, the rush of blood in her ears, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the faint hum of insects in the night. Her thoughts drifted against her will back to years ago. Her sister, younger, running barefoot through that same valley, chasing fireflies. Their mother's voice calling them in, warm bread on the table. And then the fire, the ash, the silence. She had buried it all, buried her sister's memory under years of war, until tonight. "Why didn't you tell them?" Ruiz's voice broke the silence. Her heart stopped. "Tell them what?" "That she's yours." His eyes flicked toward the girl. "Anyone with eyes can see it." Her throat tightened. Words clawed but refused to form. Finally she whispered, because they wouldn't understand. Ruiz didn't press. He didn't have to. The beacon came into view at last, a faint strobe pulsing against the dark sky. The landing zone. Her chest flooded with relief. Then the crack of rifles split the night. Gunfire erupted around them. Figures surged from the tree line, cutting them off. Too many. Ruiz cursed, diving for cover, returning fire. She dropped low, shielding her sister with her body, eyes scanning desperately for a gap, a way through. Her sister whimpered, "Don't let go." "I won't," she whispered, her finger tightening on the trigger. "I promise." The night blazed with gunfire. The beacon flickered like a heartbeat. And in that chaos she realized the truth. There was no clean escape, not without sacrifice. Not everyone would make it home. The desert had a way of amplifying silence, not the comfortable kind, but the suffocating absence of sound that pressed on a soldier's chest like invisible hands. After the firefight, after the echoes of gunfire had rolled into the endless dunes, there was nothing. No wind, no rustling of sand, just the steady rasp of their own breathing and the faint metallic ticks of overheated weapons cooling down. Alina sat with her back against the shattered remains of a stone wall, helmet off, eyes half closed against the brightness of the midday sun. Her face was streaked with dust and dried sweat, but what weighed heaviest was not the grime. It was the silence. The squad was alive, but only barely. Corporal Diaz lay with his leg wrapped in torn fabric, blood soaking through faster than Alina's trembling hands could bind it. Every time he winced, every time his lips whispered, "I'm fine," the silence swallowed his voice until it seemed like nothing mattered but the crimson stain spreading beneath him. Lieutenant Mason stood a few meters away, scanning the horizon with binoculars, his jaw tight. The man looked carved from stone, but Alina had been with him long enough to notice the tiny cracks, the twitch in his hand, the way his shoulders sank when he thought no one was looking. He hadn't said a word since the shooting stopped. That was what unnerved Alina most. Mason was the type of leader who filled the battlefield with his voice, short commands, quick reassurances, even the occasional sharp bark that snapped them into focus. But now, nothing. And the silence was heavier than any order. "Water," Diaz whispered hoarsely, tugging at Alina's sleeve. She blinked out of her haze and fumbled for her canteen. The moment she tilted it to his lips, he drank like a man who hadn't seen rain in years. His hands shook against hers, and for a brief second, Alina thought of her brother back home, how he used to gulp water after soccer practice, grinning, alive. The memory stung. "Easy," she murmured, steadying Diaz, forcing her voice to sound calm when inside her chest everything was trembling. "We're not wasting all of it, just enough." He managed a faint smile, bossy as ever. She almost smiled back but couldn't. The silence pressed again. "Sergeant." Mason's voice startled her. She turned and he was standing over her, eyes still on the horizon. "Yes, sir." Radio check now. Her throat tightened. The radio had been shattered during the ambush. She had tried fixing it, twisting wires with dust-caked fingers, but the static had been endless. She hadn't told Mason yet. Not properly. Elena reached for the battered device beside her. "Still nothing, sir. I'll keep trying." Mason's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. He simply nodded once, turned his back, and kept scanning the desert. The silence deepened. They were stranded, outnumbered, cut off, and every soldier there knew it. But no one said the words aloud. They just let silence carry the truth. Hours bled into one another. The sun crawled across the sky with merciless patience, and the shadows lengthened. Dias drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling half-coherent words about home, about food, about nothing in particular. Elena pressed her hand against his wound, whispering to him, even though she wasn't sure he heard. Sergeant Cole sat against the wall opposite her, rifle resting across his knees, eyes distant. He hadn't spoken since pulling Private Kane's body from the dirt earlier. Elena had seen him cover the boy with his own jacket, as if shielding him from the sun would make any difference. Now Cole stared past her, unblinking, lips pressed in a thin line. Silence. Every second of it was a reminder of the voices missing, the ones that would never fill the desert again. As dusk settled, Mason finally lowered his binoculars. He turned to the squad, eyes sweeping over them. The silence cracked, but only slightly when he spoke. "We move tonight." Elena's head snapped up. "Sir Dias." "We move," Mason repeated, voice like gravel. "We can't stay here. If they circle back, this position is death." No one argued. No one agreed. The silence lingered after his words like smoke after an explosion. Elena tightened her grip on Dias's hand, heart twisting. Move him. He could barely breathe, let alone walk, but orders were orders. She swallowed hard and nodded, even though her voice refused to come out. That night the desert turned cold. The squad moved in shadows, sand crunching softly beneath their boots. Elena carried Dias with Mason's help, every step dragging like a punishment. The stars stretched endless above them, brilliant and indifferent, watching silently as the broken soldiers limped across the wasteland. No one spoke. No jokes, no complaints, not even curses, just the ragged rhythm of breath and the faint scrape of gear. Elena felt the silence wrapping around them like a shroud, and it scared her more than the thought of enemy patrols, because silence left space for memory, and memory brought faces. Her mother at the kitchen table. Her brother's laugh echoing down the hall. Her father, quiet but steady, his hand on her shoulder the day she enlisted. She bit down on her lip until the taste of iron replaced the ache of remembering. Hours later they found an abandoned outpost, half buried in sand, walls crumbling, roof collapsed. But it offered cover, a place to breathe. Inside, Mason set Dias down gently. Cole checked the corners, rifle sweeping through dust and shadows before giving a curt nod. Safe, for now. Elena sank against the wall, chest heaving. Her arms screamed from carrying Dias. Her mind screamed louder from carrying everything else. Silence again, broken only by Dias's labored breathing, and the hollow sound of wind threading through cracks in the stone. Elena finally whispered into the dark, "We're not making it out, are we?" The words slipped out before she could stop them, before she could swallow them like the rest of her fear. They lingered in the stillness, heavy, undeniable. Cole didn't answer. Mason didn't look at her. Dias stirred faintly but said nothing. Silence answered, and it was heavier than gunfire. But in that suffocating weight, something strange stirred inside Elena. A defiance. If silence was going to claim them, she wouldn't let it take her voice without a fight. She reached for Dias's hand, squeezed it tight, and whispered, "You're going home, you hear me. You're going to see your family again." Her voice trembled, cracked, but it filled the outpost anyway. Mason's eyes flicked toward her in the dark. Cole shifted slightly. For the first time since the ambush, silence seemed to falter. Elena kept going. "We're not ghosts yet. Not today. Not while I can still stand." Her words echoed faintly against the crumbling walls. And though no one replied, though the silence still lingered, it was different now. It carried not just despair, but defiance. The desert night stretched long, but Alina didn't close her eyes. She sat awake, holding Diaz's hand, listening to the silence and daring it to break. Because even silence, she realized, could be endured. And tomorrow, when the sun rose, they would endure again. The dawn bled over the desert like a wound reopening, staining the sand with muted gold. For a few moments, the outpost seemed less like a tomb and more like a sanctuary, the broken stones glowing in the morning light. Elena sat against the wall with her rifle across her lap, eyes swollen from a night without sleep. Her mind replayed fragments, Diaz's fevered murmurs, the rasp of Cole's boots packing the perimeter, the occasional clink of Mason reloading his weapon even though they hadn't fired a shot in hours. She had wanted to sleep, to close her eyes just long enough to dream of something other than war. But every time her eyelids fluttered shut, silence crept back with memories sharper than any blade. She rubbed at her face, forced herself upright, and checked Diaz again. His skin was pale beneath the dust, his lips cracked. When she touched his forehead, heat seared her palm. Infection. She knew it before her training confirmed it. And still, when his eyes flickered open and met hers, she forced a smile. "You're still with me," she whispered. He exhaled a weak laugh. "I'm hard to get rid of." The sound lifted her chest for a moment. Then silence fell again. Mason appeared from the far corner of the ruin, binoculars slung around his neck. His face was harder than the stones around them, his expression unreadable. He crouched beside Elena, his voice low. "They're hunting us." Elena's stomach turned. "You saw movement." "Not movement," Mason said, pulling a small shard of metal from his pocket, a bullet casing. Fresh. He tossed it onto the sand between them, the metallic sound unnaturally loud. "Signs, tracks, they're sweeping the area. It's only a matter of time." Elena swallowed. "Then we need extraction. Without comms, we're—" "I know." Mason's tone cut the air short. He looked at Diaz, then back at Elena. "We move tonight, deeper into the dunes. We'll find high ground, keep them guessing." "Sir, Diaz can't. He doesn't have a choice." Elena bit her lip until it hurt. The silence returned, heavier now that it was filled with truth. Later, Cole joined her outside the outpost, where the wind had picked up just enough to shift the surface of the sand. He stood with his rifle ready, gaze sweeping the horizon. "You believe Mason's plan?" Elena asked quietly. Cole didn't look at her, his jaw clenched. "Doesn't matter, he gives the orders." "Cole," she pressed, "you fought longer than any of us. Tell me straight, do you think we make it out?" He turned to her then, eyes raw from lack of sleep, his voice rough. "Hope doesn't keep you alive out here. Discipline does. You want honesty. I think Mason, trying to keep us moving, because if we stop, we start thinking about the truth." "What truth?" "That we're ghosts already." Elena stared at him, fury rising. "Don't say that, don't you dare." He sighed, heavy as stone. "Then prove me wrong, Sergeant." And just like that, silence again. By midday, the sun turned cruel. Heat radiated off the stones and the air shimmered like glass. Diaz drifted further, words slurring into nonsense. Elena pressed water to his lips, knowing each drop wasted might cost them all later, but she couldn't stop herself. "Stay with me," she begged softly. "Stay." His eyes opened briefly, for a second clear, lucid. "You talk too much." She laughed through a lump in her throat. That evening Mason gathered them. The air was cooler, shadows long. "Pack light, we move as soon as it's dark. Westward toward the ridge. They won't expect it." Cole said nothing. Elena adjusted Diaz's bandage, strapping her rifle tighter, her chest burning with every movement. "Sir," she said, voice steady though her hands shook, "what if they're already waiting for us?" Mason met her eyes. There was no comfort there, no reassurance, only steel. "Then we fight until the last bullet." The silence after his words wasn't empty. It was full of fear, of acceptance, of the knowledge that none of them had said goodbye to anyone who mattered. Night fell. They moved like shadows, slipping from the ruins into the vast sea of sand. Alina half-carried, half-dragged Diaz, every step tearing her muscles apart. Cole walked ahead, scanning, his silhouette sharp against the stars. Mason moved at the rear, silent but constant, like the weight of command itself. At first the desert was still, just wind brushing the dunes, the faint crunch of boots. But then, a sound. Distant, metallic. Alina froze, breath caught. Cole raised a hand, signaling halt. They crouched low, hearts hammering. Across the sand, faint lights flickered, moving. Enemy patrol. Mason's whisper cut through the dark. Down now. They sank into the sand, barely daring to breathe. The silence roared in Alina's ears, her pulse loud enough she feared it would give them away. The patrol drew closer, shadows moving with precision, weapons glinting faintly in starlight. Alina's hand clamped over Diaz's mouth as his body jerked with a cough. Her heart stopped. She prayed to gods she didn't believe in. The patrol paused. One soldier lifted a light, sweeping it across the dunes. The beam skimmed inches from Mason's helmet. Time slowed. Cole's finger tightened on his trigger. Alina held her breath until her lungs screamed. Diaz trembled beneath her grip. And then, the patrol turned. The light swung away. Boots crunched as they moved on, fading into the distance. Silence again. But this time, it carried relief so sharp it hurt. When the patrol was gone, Mason signaled forward. They rose like phantoms, resuming their march. Alina's legs shook, but she pushed, dragging Diaz with every ounce of strength. Hours passed. The ridge loomed closer. Just before dawn, they stumbled into a shallow hollow at its base, sand piled high on either side. It wasn't safety, but it was shelter. They collapsed. Cole dropped to his knees. Mason finally lowered his rifle, and Alina eased Diaz down gently, brushing damp hair from his forehead. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind couldn't forget the light skimming over Mason's helmet, the near discovery, the way silence had once again nearly swallowed them whole. She looked at her squad, broken, exhausted, hunted, and realized something brutal. The silence wasn't just their enemy. It was their shadow, always closing in. And one day soon, it would consume them. Yet even with that truth, Alina leaned close to Diaz and whispered into his ear, her voice fierce and steady. "Not today." Her words broke the silence. And in the hollow of that endless desert, it mattered. Why did the ridge feel more like a grave than a sanctuary? Alina asked herself that question as the first streaks of dawn painted the desert in pale fire. They had survived the patrol. They had moved unseen. By all accounts, they should have felt relief. But as she looked at the jagged stone towering above their shallow hollow, she felt only dread. Diaz lay half-conscious on a bedroll, his skin clammy, sweat soaking the bandages she'd so carefully wound around his shoulder. His breath came in short bursts, every exhale weaker than the last. She kept her hand against his chest just to feel the shallow rise and fall. Proof he was still with her. Proof silence hadn't claimed him yet. Cole crouched a few meters away, scanning the horizon through his scope, while Mason sharpened his knife with slow, deliberate strokes. The sound, metal rasping on stone, seemed louder than gunfire in the oppressive stillness. Alina whispered, "That noise will carry." Mason didn't look up. "If they're this close already, we're dead no matter what." Her jaw tightened. She wanted to argue, to tell him silence wasn't just an enemy, it was a choice. But the words never left her. Hours crawled past. Heat returned with vengeance, pouring off the dunes like waves. Cole rotated his watch. Mason disappeared briefly to scout, and Alina remained by Diaz, wiping his forehead with the last of their clean cloth. He stirred once, eyes fluttering open. Why are you still here?" Alina leaned close, her throat tightening. "Because you're not gone yet." He tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. Most would have left me." "Then it's a good thing I'm not most." She forced her tone light, but tears stung at the corners of her eyes. Diaz studied her face with a faint, broken smile. "You talk like you've lost someone." Alina froze, her grip on his hand faltered. She turned away, focusing on tightening his bandage. "Rest." But his question dug into her like shrapnel. Because he was right. She had lost someone. Someone she'd never said goodbye to. Someone whose absence had driven her into the uniform, into the rifle, into the silence that haunted every step she took now. Near midday, Mason returned. His expression was darker than the storm clouds that never came. "They've tightened the net," he said, dropping into the shade. "Patrols circling both sides of the ridge. We'll be lucky if we get another night here before they find us." Cole cursed under his breath. Alina sat straighter, her heart slamming in her chest. "We can't keep moving Diaz. He won't survive another march." Mason's gaze flicked to her, then to Diaz, then back. His silence was worse than any answer. "No," Alina snapped, standing. "Don't even think it." Mason's jaw clenched. "I didn't say anything." "You didn't have to." The tension cut like a blade. Cole looked between them but didn't speak, his silence its own verdict. For the first time since this nightmare began, Alina felt fury overtake fear. "You'd leave him, after everything, after how many times he saved us in the field." Mason's eyes hardened. "And what about you, Sergeant? What about the three of us who still have a chance if we move light and fast? Do we all die here for one man?" Alina's voice cracked, but she refused to back down. "If we abandon him, then what's left of us isn't worth saving." The words hung heavy, no one daring to break them. Finally, Mason turned away, running a hand down his face. "We'll give it one more night," he muttered. "Then we decide." Silence again, but this time it was poisonous. That night, Alina dreamed of her brother. The dream was vivid, too vivid. He was sitting at the kitchen table, grinning like he used to before he shipped out, teasing her about stealing his coffee. The smell of it filled the air, sharp and warm. She reached for him, laughing. Then the sound changed. Coffee became gunfire. His grin melted into a scream. She reached again, but her hands found only ash. She woke with a gasp, the desert night pressing in around her like a suffocating shroud. Sweat slicked her skin, her throat raw from a scream she hadn't realized escaped. Diaz stirred beside her, whispering nonsense. Alina pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to steady her breathing. But her chest heaved, and the silence only made it worse. It felt alive, pressing closer, reminding her of everything she had buried. Her brother had died in a firefight 2 years before her deployment. She had joined after, carrying his dog tags beneath her vest. She had never spoken of it, not to Diaz, not to Mason, not to Cole. She hadn't wanted sympathy. She wanted purpose. But in that hollow beneath the ridge, she realized the silence she carried wasn't just outside. It was inside her, and it was winning. Just before dawn, the choice was made for them. The first sound was faint, an engine growl rolling across the dunes. Then the glint of headlights, armored transports. Cole hissed a warning, lifting his rifle. Mason cursed under his breath, grabbing his gear. Alina pressed low against the sand, heart thundering. They had been found. The transport stopped half a kilometer away. Doors slammed. Figures spilled out, too many, their weapons glinting. They fanned out with precision. "Patrols were just the screen," Mason muttered. "This is the hammer." Cole's eyes narrowed. "Then we fight." Alina's breath caught. Her hands shook, but she forced her rifle up. She looked at Diaz, too weak to move, barely conscious, and made a choice that carved itself into her chest like stone. "We hold here," she said firmly. "We fight and we keep him alive, whatever it takes." Mason glared. "That's suicide." "No," Alina said, her voice low but fierce. "That's dignity." For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then Mason gave a sharp nod. The desert exploded. Gunfire tore through the ridge. Bullets cracked against stone, sparks spitting into the dark. The silence shattered into chaos, each shot a roar against the stillness that had stalked them for days. Alina fired until her shoulders screamed, each pull of the trigger carrying every ounce of fear, fury, and love she'd bottled inside. Cole fought like a machine, laying down bursts with chilling control. Mason moved like a phantom, knife flashing when enemies came too close. Alina stayed near Diaz, her body shielding his. She felt the sand erupt around her as rounds struck inches away, but she didn't flinch. She pressed her cheek to the rifle stock, sighted her target, and fired again. Screams echoed across the dunes. The enemy pressed harder, wave after wave, their voices foreign, guttural, relentless. Alina's ears rang, her arms ached. Her lungs burned with sand and smoke. Still she fought. Still she refused the silence. Then a lull. The enemy pulled back, regrouping. The ridge lay shattered, riddled with bullet holes, the sand soaked with blood. Cole slumped against a rock, panting, his arm grazed. Mason leaned on his rifle, sweat pouring down his face. Alina's body trembled. She checked Diaz, still breathing, still alive, somehow. She met Mason's eyes across the hollow. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Because in that moment, beneath the weight of everything, Alina knew. They hadn't won, not yet, maybe not ever. But they had held. They had refused to be erased by silence. And in a war like theirs, sometimes that was enough. How long could a body endure without breaking? Alina wasn't sure anymore. The ridge was smoke and ruin, scarred by the midnight firefight. Empty shell casings glittered in the sand like fallen stars, and the metallic sting of blood clung to the air. Her body ached with every movement, her hands raw from the rifle's recoil, but worse than the pain was the silence that followed the chaos. It was the kind of silence that wasn't still, it was waiting. Alina crouched low, adjusting the bandage on Diaz's wound, trying not to let him see the fear in her eyes. His fever had worsened. Every breath rattled, shallow and fragile. She pressed her hand to his chest, willing him to keep fighting. Behind her, Cole stood watch, his face pale in the dawn light, his rifle cradled in his arms. Mason paced the perimeter, his boots crunching softly in the sand. They had beaten back the first wave, but everyone knew it wouldn't be the last. "They'll come again," Cole muttered, not looking at her. "And next time they won't test the ridge. They'll bury us under it." Alina swallowed hard. "Then we make them pay for every inch." Mason stopped packing, his shadow long across the sand. "Pay with what? Ammunition's low, water's gone, one of us can't walk." His eyes cut toward Diaz and then toward Alina. Her throat tightened. "Don't you dare." "I'm being realistic." "You're being heartless." Mason's jaw flexed, but he didn't answer. The silence stretched again, thick as smoke. Later, when the sun was a merciless weight overhead, Alina found herself staring across the dunes, wondering what her brother would have said if he were still alive. He would have told her to keep moving, to fight, to never let silence define her. But he wasn't here, and she was tired of fighting alone. She reached for her vest, fingers brushing the chain beneath it. The dog tags, his dog tags. She pulled them free, the metal warm from her skin. Diaz stirred, his voice faint. "What's that?" Alina looked down at him, tears pricking her eyes. "My brother, he died before I joined." Diaz blinked slowly, his gaze soft. "So that's why you carry everyone so heavy." She laughed bitterly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I thought if I carried enough, maybe I'd feel less empty, but it doesn't work that way, does it?" He coughed, his breath ragged. "No, but it makes you human." Alina's chest ached. She pressed the tags into his palm, her voice trembling. "Then you hold them for me. Remind me why we're still here." His weak fingers curled around the chain, and for the first time in days, she felt something stir in her chest that wasn't fear. By nightfall, Mason confirmed what they all dreaded: more transports, engines growling across the dunes, shadows moving with precision, circling. "They're not rushing us this time," Cole muttered. "They're waiting." "Why wait?" Alina asked, though the answer already chilled her. Mason spat into the sand. "Because they know we're trapped. They'll cut off every exit, then they'll come in numbers we can't stop." Alina tightened her grip on her rifle. "Then we make sure we're remembered." Mason glanced at her sharply. "You sound like you've already given up." She met his stare, fire in her voice. "No, I sound like I know what it costs to be forgotten." Silence again, but this time it didn't scare her, it steeled her. The attack came just before dawn. The sky was still dark, stars faint behind the haze when the first mortars struck. Explosions ripped the ridge apart, showers of rock and sand pelting their shallow cover. The world became thunder and fire. Alina shielded Diaz with her body, teeth rattling as another shell detonated nearby. Cole cursed, firing blind into the dark, while Mason shouted orders she barely heard through the ringing in her ears. When the barrage stopped, boots thundered across the sand, dozens of them. "They're coming," Cole roared. Alina pulled Diaz tighter into cover, then swung her rifle up. Shadows surged across the dunes, their shouts foreign and guttural, weapons flashing in the half-light. She sighted the nearest one and squeezed the trigger. The recoil slammed her shoulder, but the target dropped. She didn't stop. Her world narrowed to the rhythm of the rifle, the smell of cordite, the cries of men in the dark. Her cheek pressed against the stock until it burned, her breath ragged, her body screaming for rest. Beside her, Cole's weapon roared. Mason fought like a man possessed, knife flashing when enemies drew too close. Still they came, wave after wave, relentless, endless. At some point, Cole went down. A shot clipped his leg, sending him sprawling. He bit back a scream, dragging himself behind a rock, firing through gritted teeth. Alina crawled to him, dragging Diaz closer too, shielding them both as bullets tore through the sand around them. Cole's face twisted in pain, but his eyes locked on hers. "Don't let me slow you." "You're not slowing me," she snapped, reloading. Her hands shook, slick with sweat and blood. "You're surviving, that's all that matters." He gave a bitter laugh, coughing, spoken like someone who doesn't know how this ends. But she did. She just refused to accept it. Hours blurred into seconds. The sun rose red, bleeding across the horizon, casting the battlefield in fire. Their ammunition dwindled, each shot more precious than gold. Alina fired until the rifle clicked empty, then grabbed Cole's spare, her arms trembling. She thought of her brother, of the dog tags clutched in Diaz's palm, of all the voices silence had stolen from her. And she screamed into the chaos, "Not today." Her voice cut through the gunfire, sharp, defiant, alive. For a moment, even the enemy seemed to hesitate. By noon, the attack slowed. Bodies littered the dunes, smoke curled into the sky, and still Alina stood, swaying with exhaustion, rifle loose in her hands. Mason leaned against the rocks, blood streaking his side. Cole sat slumped, pale from blood loss. Diaz was unconscious but breathing. They had survived, somehow. But Alina knew it wasn't over. Because the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the pause before the next storm. She sank to her knees, chest heaving, tears streaking her dust-stained face. She looked at Diaz, at Cole, at Mason, and whispered a vow only they could hear. "If silence wants us," she said, voice breaking, "then it'll have to fight harder." The desert didn't answer. But in her chest, beneath the ache and fear, a spark flickered, small, fragile, unyielding. And she clung to it. Why was the silence heavier than any explosion she had ever heard? The dust had settled. The gunfire was gone. Yet the weight in her chest was louder than war itself. She stood alone on the rooftop, the scope of her rifle lowered, her hands trembling, not from fear anymore, but from everything that had led here. Beneath her boots lay the broken fragments of a city once alive. Somewhere beneath those ashes, her past still lived, whispering to her in ways no one else could hear. Her earpiece crackled, a faint voice, "Sparrow, it's over, come home." Home? The word pierced sharper than any bullet. Where was home? The barracks. The war zones that had shaped her. The shadows where her name wasn't even remembered in full. Or was home something she had lost long ago in a house that had burned before she ever wore a uniform? She didn't answer. She couldn't. Instead, she looked up at the horizon, a gray sky, the faintest outline of dawn fighting through the smoke. It was beautiful in a way that felt wrong. How could something so fragile exist in a world so cruel? She thought of her brother, his laugh, his reckless smile. He had always chased the dawn, and now she chased ghosts. Her fingers tightened on the rifle. She remembered the first time she held one, hands too small, instructor doubting her, the sound of men laughing under their breath. She hadn't answered them then either. She had let her actions speak. One round, one target, silence louder than laughter. The rooftop wind carried the same silence now, a silence that said, "You survived, but at what cost?" She closed her eyes. The mission had been completed, the civilians saved, her team scattered, wounded but alive. Yet victory felt empty. The man she had hunted, the one responsible for the deaths that haunted her nights, he was gone, but the echo of what he had taken remained. No bullet could bring back her brother. No scope could lock on to grief. Her comms came alive again. "Sparrow, respond, we're waiting." Slowly she lifted the mic to her lips, her voice hoarse, almost breaking. "Copy, on my way." But before she left, she took one last look across the city. Its ruins, its shadows, and the strange, stubborn beauty of that fragile dawn. It was there in that quiet moment she felt something ignite inside her. Not vengeance, not rage, something smaller, softer, a spark. For years she had carried only the ashes of loss, but now, standing amidst ruins, she realized ashes weren't the end. They were the soil where something new could grow. She picked up her rifle, slung it across her shoulder, and stepped back into the stairwell. Each step was heavy, but each one was forward. Her boots echoed against the cracked concrete. Down below, she knew her team would be waiting. They wouldn't understand the storm inside her. They didn't need to. The world would go on as it always did. Wars would continue. Missions would rise and fall. Names would be written, then erased. But something had shifted. She wasn't just carrying the weight anymore, she was carrying meaning. Her brother's memory wasn't chains, it was wings. When she emerged onto the street, her team looked up, eyes tired, bodies bruised. Yet when they saw her, they straightened as if her presence alone meant something more than orders. None of them spoke. They didn't need to. She gave a small nod, and together they began the long walk out of the ruins. Not as broken fragments, but as survivors who carried sparks inside the ashes. The helicopter waited miles away. The journey would be slow, painful. Every step would be a reminder of what they had endured. Yet in the silence of that war-torn street, the moral of it all came unspoken, woven into the dust, the breath, the heartbeat of survival. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And in that quiet truth, she walked forward, into tomorrow, into whatever waited, leaving behind not just the ruins of war, but the silence of a world that had finally, for once, listened.